Thank you for being here. Before starting, I'm just wondering how many of you were there yesterday hoping for me to show up? Yeah, okay, a couple of you. I'm really sorry about that. There was a strike. I don't know if you know about it. And apparently my airlines decided to not announce it to me and say until the very, very last minute, you're going to be there. Don't worry about it. So I'm still really happy to be here and to see all your faces. So today I want to talk to you about my own experience migrating an Angular application from Angular 10 to almost 19. And to do that, I would like to start with a little story. Back in 2013, I went to my first Devoxx ever. And that was quite something. It was back in Belgium. And one talk I've seen there was about front-end development. And at the time, if you need to remember, AngularJS was all the rage, React was brand new, and the speaker told everybody, you know, in your front-end, you're going to develop a lot of new features, fix bugs, do a lot of things cool. But one thing you will probably never do is upgrade your dependency, upgrade your framework. And at the time, one of my colleagues was like, yes, of course. And I was still like, why? We should embrace the possibility to have new feature, to have better tools for us. And today I want to show you that with Angular, it's totally possible. Yes, you might have some hurdles on the way, but it's totally, totally possible. So let's start a journey through this migration. If you want to migrate an Angular app, the very, very first step you have to do is to go to one website. It's Angular dev/update guide. And there you can say, okay, I want to migrate from one version to that version. And you will quickly realize that Angular blocks you. You can only go from one major version to the next one, not more than, not less. And there's a good reason for that. And I learned it during the migration because I was migrating between 11 and 12. And there was a small warning when I arrived at 12. And I was like, I don't care. It's not a real problem. My application seems to be fine. And then I migrate from 12 to 13. Directly afterward, like going 13 will fix that warning. And instead of a warning, I end up with a bunch of errors. So please go one version at a time. Be careful about that. Another thing, and the very first thing they will say to you, is depending on your Angular version, you need to update Node. Because depending on your Angular version, you cannot use any Node version. There is a beautiful table giving you which Node version you need for which Angular version. And if you do a migration like I did, you probably don't want to install a specific version of Node.js. You should probably use a tool, either NVM, for Node Node version manager, that basically allows you to switch between a Node version. Or if you do more than just Angular or Node, there is ASDF that does it for more than one runtime, so you can do it for Java and Node and things like that. That allows you to easily switch between versions because one thing that will happen is you migrate from one version to the other, you think that's great, you migrate to the next version, and at some point, because you put the previous version in production, there is a bug. And if you need to uninstall and everything, that's going to be painful, and you will not do it just once, you might do it a couple of times. So try to use those tools. Now that we have the tool, we can really try migrating. And the very first step is to do an ng update. That's what's written in the documentation. When you do the ng update, it will give you a list of packages from Angular that it can update. So you can run the ng update, and it will do the migration for you. That's great. But you need to know a bit about how the ng update works, because ng update is a schematic, and there is a lot of schematics in Angular. The most common that you know are probably the ng new to create a new project, the ng generate to generate components, services, and so on. But there is also an ng add and an ng update. The ng add, you might know it because you use Angular Material, and Angular Material say do the ng add. But the one that's really interesting in this case is the update. So when you do an update, what's happening? If you go in the documentation and look a bit under the hood, you'll realize that what does the ng update? It goes through your package JSON, look for all your dependency, and for each dependency, go look in the package JSON of this dependency and look for a specific key, ng update. If it's there, it will execute this specific key and do the migration for you. If there is nothing, it will just skip. And if we live in a perfect world, my talk would end here, because you do ng update and you migrate, and that's great. Unfortunately, we're not in a perfect world. And the one thing that's going to create you a lot of pain when you do migration is your dependencies. Because as everybody, we have dependencies. And when you start a new project, your dependency might look like this library. Well organized, everything has the right place, everything you need is there, and what you don't need is not there. But when you have an application that's been there for a couple of months, couple of years, this library doesn't look like this. It looks like this. It's basically hell. Why? Because you're probably not the first developer going through this project. And a couple of teams went through it, and everybody had a favorite library or dependency, and had its own, and did it its way. And so you might have a lot of things, and those things might basically be a trap for you. So what should you do in that case? The first thing is simply do an npm ls --all. It will give you the full dependency tree of your application. At least now you know what's in your app. You can even use that if you want to know, okay, I don't know, here it's TypeScript, but what version of TypeScript I'm using, or where is this dependency coming from? So that's useful. When you've done that, clean up your dependencies, because there is nothing useful to migrate something you don't use. So, and I say that because I did it. I tried to migrate, and then some dependency blocked me from migrating, and looking to go around, I cannot find a solution. And then I finally realized this dependency is never used. So I removed it, and okay, everything works, great. So if you want to migrate, first do some cleanup. Look at what you have in your project and say, okay, that I know I'm using, that I'm not sure where I'm using it, or only one specific spot. Do I really need it or not? Maybe you can do some cleanup. So start by doing some cleanup. And when you've done that, you can just check how is your project. How outdated are your dependency? That's the goal of the npm outdated. You can run it. It will give you your current version from your package JSON, the maximum version allowed by the server in your package JSON, and then the latest version. Again, don't take the latest version and replace it everywhere in your package JSON. That's the best way to break your project. But at least this gives you an idea, okay, how far I am from my goal. And when you've done that, you're going to play just like a cat. Because you're not going to simply go do the ng update, your dependency for Angular are up to date, and now you need to update every other dependency. And basically, you're going to say, okay, this dependency doesn't work with my current Angular version. I try to update it. Do an npmi, see if everything works. Or there is another one, and go again and again and again. Just like a cat would do with a ball of wool, it will push it with his paw, and the ball will go further and further until there is no more ball. That's basically what you're going to do. And one thing you might end up is with a diff like that. And if you look on the side, it doesn't work. On the left side, if you can see it, there is a lot more change than what you see on the screen. So from one version to the other, you might have a lot of change in your package JSON, and that's normal because you're migrating, you're updating your dependency. One neat trick I have is, basically I end up writing this little script, because when you do this repeat and try again and so on, basically you need to remove every time your non-modules. You want to remove your package lock. You're trying to update, so you don't want your dependency to be locked to a specific version. And you might have an Angular cache, so remove it also. And then you do an npmi. And again until the npmi goes through. So, seems easy enough, you would say. But of course, when you have a dependency, you have APIs. And you might end up having to migrate some code, because from one version to the other, if there was no guidelines or way to migrate these APIs, you might need to rewrite some part of your application. In my case, I was lucky, because the dependency I was using break the API, but basically kept the old one as a legacy system, saying in a couple of versions we will delete that, but for now on, you can still use the old one. If your goal is just to migrate and go to the newest version, you will go to the newest version and then try to clean up that and remove what you don't need and use a new API. But those API migration can be a pain. Another thing I encounter, I'm from Belgium. In Belgium, we have 3 languages. We have French, Dutch, and German. It means every application needs to be translated in 3 languages. One way to do it in Angular is to use NGX Translate. And in my case, NGX Translate was used. But NGX Translate was OK with version 12.0 and with 13.0. But for 12.1, the server was not OK. It was like, no, I'm only OK with 12.0. And I'm like, OK, great, but I don't want to go to 12.0. It means I need to rework everything I've done just to go on 12.0, then go to 13. I was like, I really don't want to do that. And I kind of know how NGX Translate works, and I used it for years, so I kind of trust that it should work in 12.1. So I followed the wise word of a little green guide that you might know, and I used the -- force. So basically, I did an npmi -- force. And I would say, please don't do that. I did it for one reason. I knew quite well the dependency. I was sure that was the last one blocking me from everything working. So I was like, I can try it. I'm pretty sure it's going to work. But most of the time, you shouldn't use that because you might basically hide some issue under the carpet doing that. And you don't want to do that. You want to know what's happening when you migrate. But it was a neat trick in that case. And it worked. And I didn't need to use it anymore after that. And then I end up on some problems that made me feel just like this boat, beached, and I didn't know how to go back to the sea, how to go on with all these things. And one of the problem, in fact it's 2, I have one time I had a component disappearing from a dependency. I had a component that was using and it was not there anymore. And I got even worse than that. I had a dependency that was not available anymore. So those 2 problems had a really different solution, but we will go through it. So the missing component was like, okay, I'm using this dependency. It's called PrimeNG. It provides a lot of components for you. And we were using some type of calendar there. And the calendar went missing. So I look into the documentation, and they basically say, we dropped that component because we don't want to support it. I was like, nice, thank you, guys. A warning would be nice. And then I realized that component was basically another dependency wrapped in their dependency. So I went, OK, I can find this component, and I can hot swap it in my code. Easy game. I changed it. And my application built, it runs. I was like, great. But one thing was missing in my application. It's called testing. I had no automated tests. And so everything looks right. I went clicking a bit everywhere in the application. Great. Send it to the pipeline, everything goes well. Push it to, luckily not production, but a test environment. And then someone came back and said, did you change something? Because the calendar doesn't work really like he used to be. Is there something? I was like, yes, I did change something. Yeah, basically I break something. Luckily, it was something small. But I had no way to know that because it's a large application. I don't have the time to go click on every button, on every page, everywhere. That's not possible. That's why you use tests, is to test everything automatically, repetitively, so you know when something breaks. Luckily, the fix was easy. It was just to find, okay, what was using in the old version, and how can I map it to the new version of the component. So it was just a little bit of change, not that hard, but you need to be careful about those things. Tests can be a really useful tool when you migrate because that's your safety net. You can do a lot of things, but you have a safety net to say, hey, I noticed that something breaks there. So please write tests. I know we don't think that's fun to do, but when you spend days figuring out what's going wrong, and you have a test that could have done that in 5 minutes, you realize that those 3 days could have been done by writing tests and not basically pulling some hair of your head or something like that. So write tests and be careful. The other problem was I had a dependency that went missing. So I was looking, okay, I tried to update it. I cannot find a new version. My IDE doesn't propose me any new version. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to go on NPM, look for the dependency. And indeed, there is no other version. And the painful point, I was trying to migrate from 10 to 11. So I was just starting my migration. So I was like, okay, I cannot find it anywhere. Let's go to GitHub and see if there is something there. And I end up with this message. This really nice message telling me, sorry, man, we don't care about you. You can figure it out by yourself. So I had two solutions. One was to clone this repository and then do the migration for 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think you get it. A lot of versions. And that was just one. And I was worried, okay, do I have any other dependency like that? The other solution was using the most powerful tool we have as a developer. This one. So you shouldn't do that again, because you should be careful about licenses. What can I do with this code and things like that? In my case, it was okay. I checked for it. But that was the easy way. I cloned the repository, copy the code, paste it in my application, do a few changes just to say, okay, I don't have this dependency, just define some aliases so I can use it automatically. And the good news, it worked. And it's still working with Angular 19. So basically, I should, at some point, take the time to say, I'm going to take this dependency, upgrade it. But I don't think that's really interesting to do, because when I looked a bit deeper in this dependency, there's other tools that do the exact same thing. So I could basically replace everything there with some other tools. And then I end up on this. I had a problem and I couldn't figure it out at all. So I'm doing the npmi, everything goes great. I'm like, yes, for once, no issue doing npmi, great. And then I do a run, and I get a strange error talking about post CSS. I'm like, what is post CSS? I go to check in my dependency, no trace of post CSS. I'm like, what's going on here? So I use the npmls type post CSS and go through this and think, yeah, it's there. Does anybody see an issue there? And there is a GIF for the one that find it. Yeah? Exactly. There is two different main versions of the same dependency there. So that's really tricky, because you go through all this and you say 8, 8, 8, 8. Okay, it's good. I was like, okay, that's a problem. But now I'm worried I have other cases like that. Because if I have one, I might have more than that one. So I went for looking for a tool that can detect those things. And having this nice issue, I find out the npm find dupes. How many of you knows this command? Yeah, okay. 1, 2, 3 hands, I think, that's it. So I feel less lonely every time I ask this question because most people don't know about this. So I run it, and it was quite obvious that there was an issue. The dupes was clearly saying, yeah, we have two different main versions, that's risky. I was like, okay, great. I have this issue, how can I fix it? So I'm coming from a Java background. So my first thing was like, can I upgrade one of those dependencies bringing me this? No, I couldn't, because otherwise I had some other migration to do, so don't want to do that. The next step was, if I'm coming from my Java background, if I'm using Maven, I can say, I can exclude this dependency, I don't care. But out of the box, NPM doesn't allow you to do that. I was like, what? How am I supposed to do that? And I did a little more digging and ended up using that, npm dedupe. Another mystery that most people don't know about. And what's happening when you use that? If you have a dependency A that has two dependencies, B and C, and B and C share a dependency called D, but with different version. So basically, my issue, when you run dedupe, what it tries to do is to move every dependency upper in the tree. So it fixes a specific version in the tree. That way, you don't have any issue with this dedupe. So, of course, did it. And it worked great. No more issue. And the worst part is I tried to replicate it afterward when I was presenting to show everybody how it's happening. And I could not do that because, of course, one of those dependencies has been updated since. And so the problem was not there anymore. So I was just unlucky for the timing. So that was a really nice issue for me. I was like, how am I to find that? Just so you know, the dedupe is an option when you do an npmi. You can say enable the dedupe, and the only thing it changes for you is the package lock. You will see that it will fix some versions from there. So you will not see any change. Personally, I don't use the option when I do the npmi. I prefer to know now that I know it can happen. From time to time when I do migration, I do define dupes and look, is there any issue there? Because I want to know those things. So when you have all that, you might say, okay, I'm great, but you're still styling. And until Angular 19, I would say that wasn't an issue for us. But as I say, I'm using Prime NG, and we release everything for Angular 19, but not for all the teams we use. And basically, we are using a team that's not yet supported with Angular 19. So everything in the code is working with Angular 19 except the CSS. And basically, that's the worst part because you might have an application that's running great, but it looks ugly, really ugly, so nobody wants to use it. Another case you might have if you use Angular material, we change to MDC, and we provide you with a nice schematic to do migration, and that's already great. Except when it comes to component, people tend to customize it. And there is at least 10 ways to customize a component. It means whatever effort we put into migrating everything and helping you, they might not be able to do anything for you. And that's not an Angular or Angular material problem. I talked almost a year ago with someone from Vaadin, that's a company that does front-end stuff, but with Java, and they have the exact same problem. Because if you customize deeply your component, when you migrate, something might break. So be careful about that. And that's the point where I was like, yes, I've reached the top. I'm in. But it's not because you've migrated to the latest of Angular that everything is done. Because you have brand new buildings, but you still have old house to maintain, things to update. One thing is you have probably deprecated code there that's working, but you could use something like ESLint to detect all this deprecation in your code. So you can fix it, and it avoids you to further down the line being blocked because of one deprecation is not a deprecation anymore, it does not exist anymore. So when you run that, you will have some error like this. In my case, I just put it in warning because I don't want to block the build, but by default it's error and will give you all the warning in your code for deprecated use in your code. So you should take care of that. And you might think I had a big list and you might think, oh, it's going to take me forever. It took me 1 day. So I think 1 day is viable if you have a large application and you need to fix all this. Another thing is Angular is evolving, especially those past year. If you look at the list of all the features that went from experimental to developer preview to deprecated, from 13 to 19, you will see there is quite a lot. So it means that you need to take care of that because you want to use the greatest and the latest from that because you will get some better performances, better use cases, so you should try to use it. And Angular wants you to try to use it because they provide you schematic to do that. One that's really nice is the first one. The first one, you should do it because basically you will have the new control flows. It's easier to read. It gives you better performances. You skip the little memory leak in the ng4 doing that also. So it's great, but there is another reason. Starting Angular 20, you will not be able to use the ng4, the ngIf, and the ng-switch. You will migrate to those. So start it now. Don't wait to do it. Other thing that's interesting is to migrate to standalone components. In my case, that was a bit painful, and when I say painful, it took me 2 days. Let's be honest, that's not the worst. But we had something that was kind of legacy. There was some tricky modules that cross in strange ways. So the schematic is there to help you. You can even run it just on some modules. The one where you should start is probably your shared modules. That's where you can gain the most benefits from it. But you should definitely do that. The last one is just clean up your import because you don't want to have dead codes in your application. And if you go further than that with Angular 19, very schematic for you to use signals. And signals are great. You can use signals for input, for output, and for all the queries. So if you child of your children, you can use that. And there is just that to run. And those are really great because I tried it. And they ask you, do you want me to migrate everything or just the thing that will work, or not the thing I will break? And that's useful because you don't break your application, but that's useful for another thing. You know where you did bad things. Because if you break something, it's probably there is something strange there. So it gives you pointer to improve your application. So even if you're not able to run those schematic and do everything, you can do it step by step and change your application as long as you go. You change some code, look at it and say, oh, I can use that now. Let's change it. That's what I did for one application because the client was not really ready for migrating everything to standalone. So I just enable to say, okay, every new component is going to be standalone. And when I go in an old component, I switch it to standalone and work with it. It just takes 2 minutes. That's easy. And you migrate it along. Of course, when you do such migration, as you might have seen, at some point you feel stuck, just like this car. And that's okay. You have colleagues, you have people that you can reach out. But right now, if you don't come into a conference and you don't hear AI, I think you're not in a real conference because, of course, AI can help you. But not to fix your problem for you, to help you as a rubber duck. Because let's be honest, I used it, and most of the time give you wrong answer. So it was AI wrong answer only. But one thing you give me is basically broadening my spectrum. Saying, okay, I'm stuck on that and I'm looking so closely to that, I don't realize where am I. And basically it helps me de-zoom everything and realize, oh, there is maybe another problem here. Or maybe it's coming from somewhere else. So use AI as a rubber duck, someone that can help you anytime, anywhere, when you want. Of course, when you do those migrations, you should use tools because I did 10 to 19, But there is tools to help you. There is Dependabot and Renovate. Dependabot is only working on GitHub, but Renovate works on a lot of things. And it will scan your project if you put the right thing in your CI. And it can even write for you some PR. Give you, okay, that's the upgrade you should do. Don't do that with Angular because Angular is more complex than just updating one line in your package JSON. But for simple things, it helps you getting to the latest every time. And if it's just a patch version, you can basically say merge. If you have great CI with test and everything, you can say auto merge if the CI goes through. Great. That's a tool for you. You don't have to look at every update. It can run for you, and you don't have to think about it. We are lazy, we are developers, so use tools that do the job for you. So after this migration and this call, I would like for you to remember just 3 things. If you remember more, that's great. But if there is 3 things to remember, is the first thing, just migrate 1 version at a time. Not more, not less, 1. There is advantages for that because you see that you're doing progress. Also for a business because they don't wait for 6 months for a new version because you need to migrate 10 Angular version. You can release every major version and they can see the progress. Especially if you use those new control flow, they will even see improvement in how fast it is. So great, you can show that you're not just updating a version. It has impact for us, for them. The other thing is please write tests. I know that sometimes it bothers us, but when you do migration, that's your safety net, as I said. You should write tests and run them when you migrate. It will help you be more confident into what's happening there. And the last thing is please plan your upgrades. You don't need to upgrade every time a new release of Angular is out. But at least say every 6 months we do an upgrade because we want to be there. We want to have the latest because the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's like everything. If you practice, it gets easier. So if you just say, oh no, I will not do this time. Next time you will say, I missed 1 version. I will do it next time. And before you know, you have 10 versions to migrate. And at that point you say, no, I will not migrate. If you do it every 6 months and you don't need to go for the latest, I have a client that doesn't want to use the latest. He's scared. There is clients that are scared, but they are always on the latest -1, just to be sure. And I'm okay with that. At least they're doing the upgrade. Some don't do that. So at least they plan it. And you should do it also. Before leaving you, I would like to just rate this talk, give me feedback. I really, really appreciate that. That's where we improve, that's where we learn. So please take a minute to do that. And I will wait for the phones to go down. And of course, if you want all the slides, they are there, they are available. So if you want to grab it, it's free, please go ahead. There is my socials there if you want to connect, to get in touch. If you're doing a migration and you're stuck, don't hesitate to reach out. There is a community here that's use it, learn from them. So please do not hesitate. And thank you for your attention. I have stickers here. For the men just there, I have a t-shirt for you. And I have some other t-shirts. So first come, first serve. Thank you very much.